EducationWorks PYN Summer Service Learning Program. Our topic is Sentence and Day, a Lifetime on Probation. We're examining the criminal justice system in Philadelphia. Ladies and gentlemen, we are excited to have with us District Attorney Larry Krasner here to share and answer some of our questions around this topic. Before we begin, Mr. Krasner, would you like to share a few opening words with us? Ladies and gentlemen, District Attorney Larry Krasner.
Well, thank you. It is great to be here. I see everybody has notes. You're all ready to ask some questions. I hope that they are difficult. I hope they are provocative. I hope that you do not pull any punches, because I would like to answer exactly the questions you have. And if you think my answers are not direct, tell me, so that we can have a real conversation around this. So real fast, real short. I was born in St. Louis. Ended up in this area when I was about 9 years of age, graduate of public schools, ended up going to college in Chicago, law school in California, came back here, became a public defender in 1987, and then a federal public defender in 1990, and then I started my own law firm in Philly about 25 years ago. I've been a lawyer about 30 years, and that law firm did criminal defense. I defended people who were charged with crimes. Some of it was appointed by the courts, some of it was private, meaning people hired me to do it. And the other thing that I did was civil rights work. My wife was also a civil rights attorney. My work was mostly filing lawsuits in that small number of cases where police officers had been brutal in ways that were illegal, where they had been corrupt, where they had framed people. We turned down a lot of cases because most of the time the police did the right thing. But I did end up suing the Philadelphia Police Department over 70 times. So I'm in a new role now. I've been the district attorney for 18 months, and that means instead of defending people in criminal cases, I charge them, I prosecute them. In some ways it's the opposite of what I used to do, but in some ways it's exactly the same thing I used to do, because I did what I did because I believed in justice, I believed in fairness for individuals, I believe that the system should be accurate and it should be honest, and I would like to think that even though I'm wearing a different hat, I've joined a different team. That's what I think now. I still think it should be fair, it should be careful, it should be honest, and it should be open. So I'm ready to hear some questions. Who's got some questions?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Maya Savage, and my question for you, can you explain how the criminal justice reforms you propose will make Philadelphia a safer city?
Okay, just so I understand, can I explain how the criminal justice reforms that we've been trying to do make Philadelphia a safer city? Is that the question?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So here's the thing. What happens to a young person, let's just say a young man at the moment, who's 18 years of age and goes out to the corner and sells drugs? Small amount of drugs, bad idea, shouldn't have done it. Life at home is not perfect, the family's not doing so well. He feels like those guys on the corner are his family, and there's probably some older adult out there who's manipulating him to feel that way. What happens when that person goes out there, he's got 5 bags of something in his back pocket and he sells 2 bags, police come and arrest him. They charge him with a felony. Felony is a high-level crime, right? Misdemeanors are lower level but still serious. Felony is a high-level crime. Well, that person at 18 years of age can go straight to being found guilty. And then for the rest of his life, this 18-year-old is going to be what we call a felon, a person who is defined by the fact of being convicted of that felony. What impact will that have? Well, I'll tell you right off the bat, he's not going to get nearly as good a job as he might. His earnings potential in his life might drop to only 40% of they would have been. And what impact does that have? What impact does it have on a young person who makes a mistake, does a bad thing at 18 years of age, if they're not really going to be able to make enough money to be a provider for a family, if they're not really going to be able to make enough money to get together a down payment on a house, if every time they go to rent an apartment, you're going to find the landlord doesn't want you because why? Because you're a felon. There are real consequences, and it's not just the jail. Let's just say this 18-year-old doesn't get a day in jail. He just gets 5 years probation, right? There are real consequences for that person's entire life. And those consequences affect his partner, whoever it is that he's going to be with or marry. Those consequences will affect his children, the people who would like to have health benefits that come from a good job, who would like to have the kind of financial support he could provide if he hadn't made this mistake and got this consequence. And let me tell you who else it's going to affect. When you make a whole lot less money, you're going to pay a whole lot less taxes. And when you pay a whole lot less taxes, those taxes are not going to be there to support our public schools. So it's going to affect all these people who never heard of him when you do that. I did not say he shot somebody and paralyzed them. I said he was selling drugs on a corner. So there is a very important decision to be made there. And that is, are we going to take this young person who did something we know is wrong and hurts people, are we going to take that and make it worse? Are we going to make it more likely that that young man turns to crime because he cannot get a job, cannot get an apartment? Or are we going to make it less likely that that young man turns to crime because we're going to take his case and instead of convicting him, we're going to give him some sort of accountability. We usually call it diversion, where you're going to have to do some stuff, but you're going to end up with no conviction at the end. And within a year or 2 or 3, we can erase that from your record and you can go ahead with your life. You can be accountable, but you cannot be put in the position where that happens. So let me ask you a scary question. Let's just say we do that. We do it for 20, 30 years to a whole bunch of 18-year-olds, people who probably would have straightened it out, probably would have done the right thing, right? They just weren't ready to do the right thing at 18. They were knuckleheads. I was a knucklehead at 18. It's okay to be a knucklehead at 18. You shouldn't commit crimes, but we do have to understand when you got to go hard and when you got to go soft on something, right? If you do that for 30 years and you do that to thousands and thousands and thousands of young men, what's the effect on the city? So you have all these people that businesses do not want to employ because they all have criminal records. So now they can't be bank tellers. They can't even be barbers in Pennsylvania because to get a certification to be a barber, that is going to disqualify you. You have this tax base that's not there because all these people don't make that much money, so you have an educational system that's not as good as it would be. And here you are, some business owner coming in from Montgomery County, or you're coming in from Delaware, let's say, and you say, what do I need in the city where I put my business? Well, I need employees. Well, I don't have them because all these young people have convictions. I need employees who have a good education. Well, I don't have them because only half the people in Philly come out of high school. We have an underfunded public education system where there's half the money for people like you, half as much as there is right across the line in the counties. They'll spend twice as much money on a person out there. So I'm a business owner. I don't have those two things that I want. What else do we have? Well, we have high taxes in Philly. Do you know why we have high taxes in Philly? Because so many people can't pay taxes. So we got to put the whole tax burden on a smaller group. That business is very likely going to say, I'm not coming to Philly. I can't find employees who are well educated and the taxes are too high. So what I'm saying to you is that this kind of approach to criminal justice, where you take young people who've done something bad, but that is not that bad, destroys cities. Destroys cities. Being tough on crime is a good way to ruin a city. And that is the wrong direction for us to go. We have to go a different way. That was a long answer. I'll try to make my next one shorter. Do we have more questions?
Good afternoon. My name is Yatunde. Do you believe there are racial disparities in the criminal justice system? And if so, how do you plan to address them during your term as DA?
Do I believe there are racial disparities in the criminal justice system? The answer is yes. Big ones. How do I intend to address them? Well, you know, there's a few things that we can do. We can start with some really simple stuff. One simple thing that we can do is we can gather data, we can gather metrics, and we can look and see whether the decisions made in the district attorney's office are racist, or whether decisions made, for example, by judges in the criminal justice system are racist. That people of color, for example, or let's just say black people, are treated worse than white people, or maybe worse than Asian people, or maybe worse than Hispanic people in how their cases are resolved. This was done in New York City by a group called the Vera Institute. They went to the district attorney there and said, let us study what you're doing. Let's see if there are some racial issues here. And the results were interesting. They were not exactly what everybody thought, but they did confirm that there was some racist decision-making going on, some racist results at certain steps in the process, and then other steps were pretty fair. And the really short version of that analysis is that the racism tended to be reflected in terms of certain stereotypes. So for example, if you looked at the way that a drug case was resolved, the whole system was making tougher decisions against black people and Latino people than others, right? If you looked at what they were doing with Latino people, there's this stereotype out there. I'm not saying it's true, it's not true, but there's a stereotype of Latino people using knives, right? So when you had assaults that involved knives, somehow Latino people were being punished harder than other people who were facing the same types of charges. That's a really important thing to do, to study what the machine that is your office is doing, and then to study why. Because you need to find out what's going wrong, and you need to guard against it. It's a little bit like disease. Every one of us every day is walking around out there, and somebody's going to sneeze on a table, and you're going to go over that table an hour later, and you have an immune system that's going to try to keep this disease away from you, right? Well, it's a lot better for you if you know that that table has been sneezed on, right? In the same fashion, we at the district attorney's office, we need to know what the unfair results are that are coming out so that we can guard against those results. Is there racism in our office? Yes. Is there racism in our minds? Yes. Do people operate in society, whether they admit it or not, with stereotypes and ideas about other groups of people? Yes. And do they even know about it? Not always. Sometimes they don't. You don't have to say it to think it. But it's our obligation as individuals to push back racism the same way you push back disease, the same way that you have an immune system that makes an effort to stop you from getting sick from these things. And that is what we have to do as individuals, but it's also what we have to do as an organization. We have to be willing to admit what we're doing wrong and then try to fix it. That's one thing. Another thing is it is always good in my view to have diversity in your office. And I mean all kinds of diversity, racial diversity, gender orientation diversity, but I also mean geographical diversity. We need some people from the South in the Philadelphia DA's office. We need some people from Texas and California in the Philadelphia DA's office. We need some people who speak languages that nobody in our office speaks right now. I could use somebody, who can speak Maori or some other, obscure language. We need that because all of those people are coming to the office with experiences that no Philadelphian has ever had. They've seen other ways of doing things in other places, and they bring all of those good ideas to us. So what we did last year is we went all over the country to try to recruit people. We wanted people of color, but we wanted, simply put, the brightest and the best students from all over the country. And what we found is if you go looking, you will find that. The percent of diversity among our attorneys when we started last year was 20%. 20%. Now this is in a city that is approximately 40% black, 40% white, and about 20% other people of color, right? There was only 20% diversity in a city that is 60% diverse. That's kind of a problem. And that's not to say that all white people are going to do the wrong thing, all black people are going to do the right thing. That's just not true. That's not how reality works. But we still want to have that lived experience. We still want to have that diversity of all these different types. We want some people who love to read books all day, and we want some people who love to talk all day. We want all of that in our office. So we went all over the country. We went to 25 different law schools that were ranked very high. And we also went to 5 of what are known as historically black university law schools in the country. We recruited heavily at all these places. And the class that we have coming in, this is over 60 attorneys now, it's about 65 attorneys. The class we have coming in, if you include LGBTQ, if you include gender orientation, is 55% diverse. 55%, okay? We started with 20%, we're hiring 55%. If you take out gender orientation and you speak of those other diversity factors, it's 49%. So that's change, but it's change in really important ways. And let me just give you one example. We hired a woman at Northwestern Law School, which is a great law school. She's from Philly. She went to Central High. Her name is Carla Agbiro. Carla's parents are from 2 different countries. She speaks 2 different languages. She's a citizen of 2 different countries. She was such a great student that she went to Central and got into one of the best law schools in the country, and nobody from Philly used to go looking for people like her. They would just let her go to some fancy law firm in New York or to some great law firm in California, which is where she was going to go. She already had a job lined up doing immigration law in California, and we got her to come back, right? So that kind of thing, making sure that you are really trying to change the diversity of the office. It changes the level of experience. It gives you role models. It makes a comfortable place for people who have the experience of the people who you're having to judge. I mean, let's be honest. There is a disproportionately high number of people of color who are going to jail and who are being given convictions. And that should not all happen at the hands of people who are white. That ain't fair. So I think that is another factor that we have to get at. I'm sure that there are a lot more that we can do. I mean, one of the issues right now is because we have so few senior attorneys who are from a diverse background, we don't have enough supervision. We don't have enough role models coming from people who are diverse. And so we are having to address that. It's going to take a little while. We're not going to be able to fix this tomorrow. We're going to have to hire a class and then hire another class and hire another class. But we're making a difference in that regard, and I think it will help us with those issues around racial disparities.
Hello, my name is Demira. So the ACLU states that about 1 out of every 35 Philadelphians are under some form of supervision. Why are so many people in our city on parole or probation?
Great question, like all of them. So supervision, usually what it means is you're on probation or you're on parole. Philadelphia is one of the worst cities in the United States in terms of it being over-supervised, all right? Meaning there's too many people under supervision, and I'll tell you in a minute why I think that. If you walk down the street right now, for every 22 adults that you see, every 22, one of them right now is on probation or parole. We have over 35,000, between 35,000 and 40,000 Philadelphians right now who are under supervision on probation and parole. Compare that for a second to New York City. We are a city of 1.6 million. New York, during the day, 10 million. At night, 8 million. So it's at least 5 times bigger than us. They got 12,000 people. They got 12,000 people in a much bigger city. We got almost 40,000 in a much smaller city under supervision, and they have less crime than we do. But how can that be? Isn't it a good thing for there to be eyes on you all the time, watching what you're doing? Well, the answer is it can be a good thing for the first year, the second year, maybe the third year. But after the third year, it does more harm than good. People who have really long periods of parole and probation are more likely to end up back in jail than people whose probation and parole ended at 3 years. I know it doesn't make sense, right? You would think if people are watching you all the time, then you're not going to do anything wrong. So let me give you an example of how that happens. So you have someone comes out of jail, doing well, he's got a job, he's working as a landscaper, he's cutting trees, tree surgeon, right? He's out there, he's got his chainsaw going, we got all these limbs cut off of the tree and they're loading them into the chipper, it's chipping up these things. And he says to his boss, hey boss, just a reminder, I got to go see my PO this afternoon again, because he has to go see his PO every 2 weeks. And he's been doing this for 5 years. And this is a good boss. This is someone who looked past the fact that he came out of jail, looked past the fact that he was a felon, and he hired him. And the boss says, oh no you're not. I got to finish this job today. We got another job starting tomorrow. We're going to have rain in about 2 hours. I need to make your payroll tomorrow. And I'm not getting paid unless I finish this job. Oh no you're not. I've let you go all this time, but you're not going to see your PO. So now this landscaper, he's got a choice. He can say, well, goodbye, boss, and be fired, and leave the boss hanging. I'm going to see my PO. Or he can skip the PO. If he skips the PO, he has violated his probation and parole. He can be sent back to jail. The job can be ended, right? That is not a bad person. The boss is not a bad person. The person who has been the landscaper for 5 years is not a bad person. That is a bad system. That has taken decent people and putting them in an impossible position. Here's another example. Believe it or not, there are some people who smoke marijuana. I'm not here to say that is a good thing or a bad thing, but I am here to say there are some people who smoke marijuana. There are some other people who drink alcohol. Neither one of these things is good for young people. Neither one of these things is good for old people, but it happens. So if you are being supervised for 20 years instead of 3 years, and they find that in year 10 you smoke some marijuana, that can put you back in jail. Never mind you don't drink beer, never mind you don't drink brown liquor, never mind you don't drink vodka. Way down the road they find you had some marijuana, they can put you back in jail. Take you away from your family, end your job, which has been going well, stop you from being a provider, they can do that. But they didn't catch you the first 3 years, they just caught you in year 10. So if your supervision ended in 3 years, the danger of losing all these things you've done right that keep you away from crime wouldn't be there. So those are just a couple examples about how in a real specific, straightforward way, too much supervision can cause a real problem. It's something that we're trying to change, and I got to be honest with you, we're not having as much success as we would like yet, because the system seems to like having a lot of people on probation and parole more than it should. But in the long run, it is a battle that we are going to win. You should know that Pennsylvania is right now the second worst state in the United States for having excessive supervision. The second worst. The worst is Georgia. And Georgia, in the last couple of years, got smart and decided to change its laws so that you can't give these super long periods of supervision. So Pennsylvania, soon enough, if we don't do something, will be the worst state in the United States for excessive supervision on probation and parole. It's a problem. I'm sure many of you have heard of the situation around a certain famous musician named Meek Mill. Meek Mill is spoken about a lot because here is a person who, when he was young, he did something wrong, he was convicted, he was given a sentence of 11 and a half months to 23 months in jail, and yet 10 years later, after he's had a lot of fame and he's been very successful in his career, he ended up being sent back to jail for 2 years, not because he had committed a new crime. I repeat, not because he had committed a new crime, but because a judge found him to be disrespectful, maybe a little obnoxious. He wasn't doing exactly what she wanted. He popped a wheelie on a motorcycle in public. And so she kept extending and extending and extending his supervision, and finally got fed up and gave him 2 years in jail. There's a lot of, I cannot, other than saying that that case does involve my office. This all happened in Philadelphia County. We are Philadelphia County, so we're involved in that. With that, my only comment to you would be that I think that is probably the best known national example, especially for younger people, of what it can look like to have supervision that goes on for a very long time, and what kinds of things can happen as a result. And I leave it to you to figure out whether or not in your mind you think that makes sense and you think that is fair. Are there more questions?
Good afternoon. My name is Selena Sanchez. Are there any resources or programs in place that can help people who are on parole or probation keep a job, get housing, or receive benefits?
So that's a great question. The answer is not enough. I mean, there is help out there in different forms. There are a lot of nonprofit organizations. Community Legal Services provides help with things like benefits, but there are not the kinds of really good reentry programs, meaning programs for people who are coming out of jail, that I think should be there. I would love to see the city take a lot of its money out of the jails, state take a lot of money out of the jails and put them into things like summer job programs for people or reentry programs for people coming out of jail. My wife is a judge and has been for almost 19 years, and she was one of the founders of a mentor program, meaning a program where people coming out of jail could be connected to a mentor, and that person would help them through the various steps of getting back into a good situation in society, getting more education, getting a job, getting their resume together, getting the ID they needed to get the benefits, getting medical coverage, things of that sort. So there are efforts in the courts, but this is a system that spends way too much money on jail and way too little money on things that actually prevent crimes, like the kinds of things you're talking about. Is there one more question?
Can you talk about the steps your office is taking to decrease the number of people on parole and probation?
Sure, happy to. So there's the easy part. The easy part is that we have brought about policies on what we are going to recommend at sentencings. And the policies are to try to keep that probation and parole period short, right? So when we have new cases that are turning into guilty pleas, we will negotiate a period of supervision that we think is moderate and makes sense. Or if we have someone who goes to trial, loses a trial, and it's our time to make a recommendation to a judge, because it's the judge who decides the sentence, then we're going to make a recommendation that's also going to try to keep that supervision from not being crazy. That has been a complete success. And when we run our own data, what we see is that if you look at a few years ago, the amount of supervision that was being included in sentences was 2 or 3 times higher than it is now. So we're having success with that. But we are having less success trying to take the number of people who are on probation and parole right now and trying to cut it down. And the reason for that is that we have to go get judges to approve it, right? So let's just say there's somebody who got a period of supervision that was 10 years, but they've been doing really well for 5, right? That's a case where we probably would support shortening that period of supervision down to the 5. But you got to file a motion. The judge has got to be willing to grant it. The judge has got to sign it. The judge may need to bring that person into court and do a whole hearing. And we're getting a lot more resistance to that. It is just easier to do justice moving forward than it is to go back in time and try to fix things from the past. It is easier for us to do the things that are completely within our power, such as make a sentencing recommendation, than it is to have to work with others in the system who have either more power or the same amount of power. Not every judge wants that work. Not every judge wants to reconsider what it was they decided a while ago. Not every judge agrees with our policy. And that's okay. We don't expect judges to agree with us all the time. But in terms of change, like real change, we do a lot better when the real change is moving forward in time and it's something that we can just do. We can make a decision and do it. And it's more difficult when we try to go back and correct things in the past that we believe were wrong, and we have to persuade other people to do it. Does that work?
Please give the crowd a round of applause.
Thank you.